The Riddle family moved into a remote mansion, bought at auction after the bankruptcy of the previous owners. The house, designed as an ideal shelter, was surrounded by a high fence with barbed wire, and its ground floor windows were barred. "This is security," Claire, a mother of two, told herself as she stared at the cracks in the concrete of the driveway. Her husband, Greg, a former military man, praised the sturdy doors and camera system. But their teenage daughter, Emily, noticed the first discrepancy. Someone's tools were left in the garage: saws, axes, all perfectly cleaned of rust, as if they had been used the day before. The son, 10-year-old Jacob, found a toy bear with a gouged eye in the garden. There was a microchip inside it. Greg, thinking it was part of an old alarm system, threw it away. But that night, Emily woke up to the sound of footsteps on the stairs. There was nothing on the cameras in the app except static. In the morning, she found a dirty handprint on the windowsill of her room, too large to be a child's. A week later, Claire started rummaging through the basement, trying to find boxes of dishes. She heard a whisper behind the wall of shelves. Leaning her ear, she heard a man's voice, "Don't make any noise. They're listening." When Greg took down the shelves, there was a frosted glass door behind them. Beyond it is a room with an armchair chained to the floor and walls covered with scratches. There were clumps of hair on the floor and an empty injection package labeled midazolam, sedative. Greg, ignoring his wife's panic, called the police. While the guards were examining the room, Emily secretly took a picture of a barcode with numbers on the wall. An internet search led her to a forum of former employees of a private prison that was closed after the torture scandal. One of the posts read, "They have moved the equipment. Look for black marks." Meanwhile, Jacob, playing in the garden, came across a trapdoor. Inside there is a tunnel leading to the bunker. There was a map of the area on the wall with house markers and dates. The last date coincided with the day the Riddles moved in. There was a laptop in the corner. When I turned on, the screen was filled with video files, each one showed different families living in the house. The footage was captured with hidden cameras. In the last video, a masked man methodically cut a doll with a knife, repeating, "It's your turn soon." In the evening, when Greg was checking the perimeter, the cameras suddenly went out of order. A squeaky voice came from the security system speakers, "Welcome home." At the same moment, the locks on all the doors clicked. The Riddle family froze when they heard the click of locks. Greg made a dash for the front door, but the lever wouldn't budge. "The system is blocked from the outside," he muttered, pulling a pistol from his holster. Claire hugged Jacob, whose eyes were wide with fear. Emily, with trembling hands, opened the laptop from the bunker. The screen went out, leaving only the inscription, "The rules of the game have changed." The police, who were examining the room in the basement, did not respond to calls on the radio. Greg checked the window and noticed that their cars had disappeared from the yard. "They're not real cops," he hissed, remembering how one of the officers avoided eye contact. Emily remembered the barcode with the numbers. "This is the prisoner's ID," she whispered, scrolling through the browser history on her phone. The forum of former prison guards was full of threats against traitors, but one post stood out: "If you find black marks, run. They are testing new methods." Jacob tugged at his mother's sleeve. "The tunnel from the garden. It leads to the forest." Greg nodded, smashing the window with his jacket-wrapped fist. "Quiet. They're somewhere nearby," he ordered, helping the family out. In the garden, under the howling wind, the trapdoor to the bunker gaped like a trap. "No," Greg stopped his son, "this is the entrance for them. We need to cross the fence." They crept along the fence until Greg found the area where the barbed wire had been cut. A branch snapped behind him. Greg turned around, but the shadows were silent. As Claire climbed over the fence, a figure in black burst out of the darkness. Greg fired into the air, and the man recoiled, disappearing into the night. When they reached the road, they saw the lights of the gas station. Emily, panting, dialed 911. "We need help. This is Emily Riddle. We're in a house on Old Mill Road. We are being persecuted." Suddenly, the connection was interrupted. The phone vibrated, an unknown number. On the screen is a screenshot of their escape from surveillance cameras. "Bad choice," the text read. At the police station, where they were taken an hour later, a detective with bags under his eyes grinned. "Your house belonged to Securitech, a company that conducted experiments on mind control. They rent out the mansion to families, to watch them break down in fear." He held out a photo. The man in the mask, the one from the video, turned out to be an ex-employee of a closed prison. "He's dead. He hanged himself in his cell 3 months ago." The next day, when the Riddles returned for their belongings under guard, they saw that all the evidence had disappeared. The room in the basement is filled with bricks, the bunker is filled with concrete. Securitech denied involvement, and local sheriffs advised not to invent theories. Now, sitting in a rented apartment, Emily is updating the forum. A new anonymous post: "Family number 13 failed the test. Get ready for recruitment number 14. The attached photo shows their house, and a silhouette with a knife is barely visible in the window. The Riddles were sitting in a rented apartment, trying to recover from their ordeal. But there was no peace. Every night they woke up to sounds that seemed to haunt them even here. Creaking floorboards, rustling outside the door, quiet laughter coming from the empty hallway. Claire began to notice that things in the house were moving on their own. Either the cup will end up on the other side of the table, or the family photo will turn face down. Jacob, who was usually so talkative, was now silent, staring at one point, as if he saw something that the others couldn't see. Emily, despite her fear, continued to dig into the information. She found old newspaper articles about the closed prison, which mentioned experiments on prisoners. In an interview, a former guard who wished to remain anonymous talked about black tags, special codes that were used to track test subjects. "They don't stop," he said. "Even after death. They will always find you." One morning, Claire found a piece of paper on the kitchen table with the words neatly written on it: "You forgot something important." Below the text was a drawing of the plan of their old house with a marker in the corner of the basement. Greg, despite the protests of his family, decided to return. "We need to know what it is," he said, clutching a flashlight in his hand. After returning to the mansion, they went down to the basement. In the corner where the walled-up room used to be, there was now a gaping hole in the wall. Beyond it is a narrow passage leading into the interior. The air was damp and heavy, smelling of mold and something chemical. There were scratches on the walls, as if someone was desperately trying to get out. They found a small room at the end of the tunnel. There was a notebook on the table, covered with shaky handwriting. The last entry read, "They know that I know. If anyone finds it, run. They're not human. They were never human." There were empty vials of an unknown substance on the floor, and a calendar with dates circled in red hung on the wall. The last date was a week later. Greg looked around the room and found a small metal box in the corner. Inside is a folder with photos. Each one shows different families who lived in the house before them. The last picture was of the Riddle family, taken through their bedroom window. On the back is the inscription, "Family number 13. The test is completed. The results are satisfactory." Suddenly the light went out. A whisper came from the darkness, "You shouldn't have found this." Greg lit a lantern, but the room was empty. Only there was a new piece of paper on the table. The game continues. When they returned to the apartment, they tried to forget what they had seen. But the next day, Emily discovered that her laptop had turned on its own. A video was open on the screen. The record shows their house, but not the one they left. The windows were smashed, the walls were covered in soot, and Jacob's toys were lying on the floor, torn apart. In the center of the frame stood a masked man holding a doll with a gouged eye. He slowly turned to the camera and whispered, "We are waiting for you." Since then, the Riddles began to notice that they were being watched. Unfamiliar cars were parked outside their house, and shadows were flickering in the windows of neighboring buildings. One night, Jacob woke his parents screaming. He claimed to have seen a masked man outside the window looking directly at him. When Greg ran outside, there was no one there. But there was a dirty handprint on the windowsill. Claire started rummaging through old documents, trying to find a connection between Securitech and their house. She discovered that the mansion was built on the site of an old psychiatric hospital, closed after a scandal involving the disappearance of patients. In the archives, there was a photo of the head doctor, a man in a mask, similar to the one they saw in the video. One morning they received a package. There was a teddy bear inside, just like the one Jacob found in the garden. This time, both of his eyes were ripped out. Inside is a note, "See you soon." The Riddles knew it was useless to run. They were part of something bigger, something that would never let them go. Every night they heard footsteps outside the door, and every day they found new gifts. And the scariest thing was that they began to doubt the reality of what was happening. Maybe it's all just a figment of their imagination. Maybe they've been part of the experiment for a long time, without even realizing it. But one night, after everyone went to bed, Emily heard a voice from the baby monitor speaker they had left in Jacob's room. "Sleep well," a man's voice whispered. "We're already here." She rushed to her brother's room, but he was asleep. Only on the wall above his bed was written in red paint, "Family number 13." He Riddles could no longer ignore what was happening. Every day brought new evidence that they were being watched, harassed, and tested. But now they decided to fight. Greg, using his military skills, began to develop a plan. They couldn't just sit around and wait to be pushed to their limits. It was necessary to act. Emily, despite her fear, continued to explore the connection between Securitech and their house. She found old drawings of the mansion, which showed that there was a whole network of tunnels under the house leading to other buildings in the area. The map they found in the bunker showed not only their house, but also neighboring buildings, including an abandoned school and an old factory. "It's not just an experiment," she said. "It's a system. They control the whole area." Claire, meanwhile, contacted a journalist who once wrote about the scandal surrounding Securitech. He agreed to help, but warned, "If you are right, then this is much more than just corporate experiments. It may be related to people who will stop at nothing." One evening, when Greg was checking the perimeter of the apartment, he noticed that an unmarked van was parked behind their house. Two men in black were sitting inside, watching their windows. Greg took a picture of them and sent it to a journalist. An hour later, he called back, "These are former employees of a private military company. They are connected with Securitech. Be careful." The Riddles decided to strike back. Using the information Emily had gathered, they made a plan to infiltrate the abandoned school marked on the map. They assumed that there might be a control center there, or at least a part of the system that monitors them. At night, armed with lanterns and cameras, they went there. The school was huge, with broken windows and peeling paint. Silence reigned inside, broken only by the creaking of floorboards underfoot. There were old posters on the walls and broken desks in the classrooms. But in the basement they found what they were looking for, a room filled with monitors. The screens show surveillance footage from their home, apartment, and even the streets they walked on. There was a server in the corner, flashing lights. Emily plugged in her laptop and started copying data. Suddenly, the face of a masked man appeared on the screens. "Did you think you could stop us?" he said. "You're wrong." The monitors went off, and footsteps sounded in the hallway. Greg grabbed the family and led them out the back door. They ran through the woods until they reached the car. At home, they found that their apartment had been trashed. It was written on the wall in red paint, "The game is over." But the riddles didn't give up. They passed the copied data to the journalist who published the investigation. The article caused a scandal, and Securitech had to publicly justify itself. But the riddles knew that this was just the beginning. A few days later, they received a new message: "Did you think you had one? We're just getting started." This time, a photo of their new apartment, taken from the inside, was attached to the message. They realized that it was useless to run. The only way out is to keep fighting. Now they live in constant readiness. Every day brings new threats, but they know they have to stick together. Because if they break down, they will become just another family that has disappeared without a trace. And they don't want to be just a number in someone's experiment. They want to survive.